So I think, once again, the answer to that question is sort of yes and sort of no. If you take a population-wide approach, you can say we should put statins in the drinking water because the statistics show that there is a 25% relative risk reduction or 3.5% absolute, but there's still tons of people having events even though their cholesterol is controlled. With the Fourier PCSK9 study, where they got the LDL cholesterols down to 30, the absolute risk reduction was only 1.5%. So there are a huge number of people on statin and the PCSK9 inhibitor who still had a heart attack. So the problem that your question exemplifies is that should we take a population approach? So in order to get rid of an infectious disease, you take the pump handle off the water pump, or do we individualize it? And that's where a mixture of non-invasive imaging and more sophisticated analyses of both genetics and blood tests can be really beneficial. So you treat each person as an individual. Not everybody should be on fish oils, for example, but there's a subgroup in which they're really useful. So I would not say give fish oils to everybody or give statins to everybody, because a bunch of people on statins are going to have a heart attack and die, and their relatives are going to be really surprised. There's always hope. I think the polypill approach is similar. If you have an extremely inexpensive medication and you give it to everybody, it's going to help a certain percentage. Not everybody by any means, but it's going to help a small percentage, and so you can justify that. My problem with that approach is it gives false hope to a huge number of people. I'm taking my polypill, I must be protected, but then I actually have a heart attack. So there's pros and cons to that. And I'm not a proponent of the polypill because there are many people in which it will not help. 40 or 50-year-olds? Yeah. So your question is, should we use the PCSK9 inhibitors in a huge population because it gets the LDLs to 30 on top of a statin? And my answer to that is no. Because in the Fourier study, if you remember, the absolute risk reduction was 1.5% when they added the PCSK9 inhibitor, and the LDL cholesterol went to 30 as compared to 90. So while that is statistically significant, 1.5% absolute risk reduction is ridiculous. Again, if you had 30% of the placebo group having an event, now you give them this, and it's 28.5%, there's still 28.5% of people having events. So in the right population, the PCSK9 inhibitors are marvelous, they're a godsend. But they're not a panacea because heart disease is not always caused by cholesterol. So I think there are a couple questions in there, and one is, should you use measurements of soft or, quote, unstable plaques to make a decision? And the answer to that is yes. As you remember, SHAPE came out 15 years ago. We had the SHAPE guidelines that we published suggesting that coronary calcium scores can identify a high-risk group better than the traditional risk factors. And finally, at American Heart this year, they've sort of caught up, and they're suggesting or saying that's the right thing to do. But since that time, the ability to detect what may be soft or unstable plaques has improved because the technology has improved. So there are two approaches. One is to say, I'm going to treat the individual because they have what I see as soft plaques, and therefore there's a certain therapeutic approach that I think might be warranted. And that could be different from what we do now. There could be pulse therapy, there's a lot of approaches. The second issue is if everybody has coronary calcium, that means they have coronary atherosclerosis, they are at increased risk, so we should do something for them, but maybe it's a stabilization platform. Maybe if you have stable coronary disease, all you need is 20 milligrams of a medium active statin. Or maybe you need a fibric acid derivative, or maybe you need niacin, but your disease is stable, so I'm not going to have to subject you to as high a risk as I would if it was unstable. If it was unstable, then maybe slam the LDL to 30, give them nicotinic acid, do whatever's necessary for that individual person, and then when they're stable, go on a stabilization program.